All right, so now that you've gone over those vocabulary words that have to do with the transversal and parallel lines, let's go over some properties that you already know. So this is known as the addition property, and it can either be of equality or of congruence. Now, the only difference between of equality and of congruence is one's dealing with equal signs, the other one's dealing with congruent signs. So I'll just remind you, this is an equal sign, this is a congruent sign. Okay, that's the only difference between equality and congruence. So the addition property, if A equals B, then A plus C equals B plus C. So an example of this would be like 3 plus X equals 7, then negative 3 plus X equals 7, then we would add 3 to both sides because that doesn't change the property. This is when we use it. So we would get X equals 10, right? So subtraction property is the same thing, but instead of adding to both sides, we're subtracting from both sides. So like if I had X plus 7 equals 10, then I would subtract the 7 from both sides, get the X equals 3. So I just use the subtraction property of equality. All right, multiplication property of equality just says if I multiply both sides by the same thing, it remains the same. So like if I had 3 equals X and I multiply both sides by 4, then I would get 12 equals 4X. Does that make sense? If I use the division property of equality, it's the same idea. So if I have 4x equals 12, then I divide both sides by 4, and I get x equals 3, which is what I had before. Okay, dividing does not change your equation as long as we divide on both sides. Now the distribution property, its full name is the distribution property of multiplication over division. So that means we would take our outside number and multiply it to the inside. We've seen this a ton this year. Every time we've done that double distribution, every time we've done box method, we've been using this property. So like this would be like 4 times x plus 3 is going to be the same thing as 4x plus 12. Okay, because all we did was multiply the 4 through. All right, hopefully those properties are doing okay. We've seen some pretty good examples. Reflexive property is like a reflex. You equal yourself. So you can be the reflexive property of equality or congruence. Again, equality just means you have an equal sign. And congruence just has a congruent sign. If you see, we're going to go over this again twice on this page. It's like I want you to get it or something. So reflexive properties like when it equals itself. So like I could say that angle A is congruent to angle A in the case of these two triangles. So like this would be ABC and ADE. The angle A in both triangles are the same because it's the same angle A. Okay, the symmetric property says that if I can say A equals B, then I can say B equals A. This is the same thing as saying if I know that AB is congruent to AC, then I also know, in other words, I can flip them, then AC is congruent to AB. I can say it both ways. So the transitive property says if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. So this we can use. It's a fairly useful property. We use it all the time in logic. So like if I said, I'm taller than my sister, and my sister's taller than the cat, I am taller than the cat. I can say that because I know I'm already taller than my sister. Well, then anything shorter than my sister has to be shorter than me. Does that make sense? Or if I have the same color of eyes as my best friend, and my best friend has the same color of eyes as her boyfriend, then I have the same color of eyes as her boyfriend. Okay, that's the transitive property. Okay, so this is like whenever you write something like this. So I've got A equals B equals C, then I can write that A equals C. I just cut out the middleman. That's the transitive property. Now, substitution property says if A equals B, then B can replace anything that A has. So if I have something like x equals 3, then I can go through any equation. So like let's say it was x plus 7. Okay, I'm going to write this slightly differently. And x plus 7 is something, let's say, equals y. Then I can go through and be like, okay, let's plug in 3 everywhere there's an x. So this would be 3 plus 7 equals y. And then we'd have 10 equals y. So then we're able to use substitution. So this is the substitution when we took 3 and plugged it in there. Okay, so we can use substitution. Every time we solve and we plug it back in, that's substitution. Or any time that we use substitution when solving systems in the last unit. And when we solve systems, we use substitution to plug in when we had y equal to something, we could plug in that something in for y. Okay, property of equality versus congruence, use the equal sign versus the congruent sign. Been going over this. So like this right here is the property of equality because that's the equal sign. This is the property of congruence because it has the congruent sign. All right, so now let's get some handle on this. So we've got 3 more terms, and then you guys are going to have a matching activity where it shows you something and you match it to the property, and you can use your notes on this. And then it's time to write your recap. All right, so bisect means to cut in half. So an angle bisector means to cut an angle in half. So if this is my angle, this would be my angle bisector, which would mean that that angle is equal to that angle. So these 2 angles are equal. A segment bisector is going to take a segment and cut that in half so that this side equals this side. Okay, you guys will probably like that pretty well. The angle addition postulate says this. If 2 adjacent angles are added together, you get a larger angle. In other words, so like I've got an angle, it's ABC, and I've got another angle, CBD. So I can say that angle ABC plus angle CBD equals angle ABD. So angle ABD is this angle right here. Angle ABC is this angle right here. And angle CBD is this angle right here. Okay, in other words, if I add 2 angles together, I get a bigger angle. Segment addition postulate, same idea. If 2 segments that are adjacent are added together, you get a longer segment. So in other words, here's my segments. It's A, B, C. So I can say that segment AB plus segment BC is equal to segment AC. With AB being the segment right here, BC being the segment right here, and AC being the whole thing. Okay? All right, so now what I want you to do is identify the properties being used in this matching activity, and then please write your recap for the lesson. Okay, thanks.